This is the fourth video in this CSVkit tutorial, and I'm going to talk about csvstat in this video. So let's first of all just have it here with its help page. So here's the help page, and the brief description is that this prints a descriptive statistics for each column in a CSV file. So if you're used to R, this is kind of like summary, and if you're used to like pandas, this is kind of like describe. If you're not used to any of them, that's completely fine, but it essentially gives you some descriptive statistics for each column. And the best way to see this is just to use it. So let's clear the screen here. You can see that I still have my Excel file. So let's grab into CSV, turn my Excel file into data.csv. There we have that. And now we can use csvstat on this data.csv file. And we get a lot of stuff. So let me just scroll up to the top and we can look at some of this together. Here is the top. And here you can see we get state, which is the first column. It says that this is a certain type of data, namely text. So what csvstat does is essentially to go into each column and try to infer what kind of type this is. And you can see here that we essentially get three different types. It's text, as you can also see in the second column. But the third one is a number. Then we get some more text, text, number, text, number, number. We also have date. And depending on which type of data you get different kinds of descriptive statistics. Intuitively, this makes sense. I mean, if you have numbers, then it makes sense to talk about medians and averages and so on. But this is not really that useful for dates. Then you might be talking about smallest value of the date or largest value of the date or most common. So again, let's go to the top. So for the state column, we have a text data. It says how many null values are in this. This is just false, meaning that there are no missing values. It says how many unique values there are. It's only one value. That means that everything here in the state column is precisely the same. And it says that the longest value has 2 characters and the most common one is NE. By knowing this, you can infer that everything in the first column is just NE, has only one unique value, namely NE. This is everywhere in all 1036 of the entries. There are no missing ones. And you can immediately recognize that we can here distill that this is a pretty boring column by looking at these descriptive things, but this would be quite hard to look manually. Then you have to look through all 1036 entries and check that there aren't like any other states going on here. The county is again text. It doesn't have any missing values. It has 35 unique values. And that makes sense. There are more than one county in a state. It has the longest text value has 10 characters, and the most common ones, I think it typically prints the 5 most common ones, is printed here. So it's Douglas, Dakota, Class, Hall, and Lancaster. As far as I understand, there are more counties than this in the state. So that means that we're missing something that is not in the dataset. There could be good reason for this. Perhaps this is from a retailer that doesn't operate in all of the counties and so on, but it gives you some further questions that you can now start to ask. Namely, why are we missing some of the counties? Maybe we don't operate there, or maybe we're actually missing some real data that we have collected. Okay, so this is 2 text columns. Here's a number column. Here you can see we get a bit of a different data. Type of data is number. It doesn't have any missing values. It has 35 unique values. And it has now some more descriptive statistics that are useful for numbers. This is like the sum of all the values, the mean, the median, and the standard deviation. Also, I get the most common values. Instead of looking through all the columns, let's go down to the date one. I think that was number 10. Yeah, the ship date. So here it says the type is date. It doesn't have any missing values. It has 84 different values. So that means that you have essentially 84 dates where you have shipments. The smallest value is in 2006 and the largest one is in 2014. And here you can see the most common values. And you can actually see here that on this specific date in 2013, you had almost 500 shippings. And that's quite a lot if your total is like 1036. That almost half of all your shippings is in this specific date. So one of the things you can immediately recognize is that it's quite a lot of scrolling for me just to look at a few of these. Typically, you're not always interested in all of the columns. So what you then do is to use the command we had in the previous lecture, namely csvcut, to filter out some of them. So just to see, we have our data column. Then we can use csvcut as the repetition from last time. Let's maybe do county and then total cost and then ship date. I hope this is correct. Of the data.csv. Let me just look at it. Yeah, that looks good. And then pipe this into csvstat. Now we get only 3 of them. And now you can see that they're renumbered. So county is 1, total cost is 2, and ship date is 3. So here we have 1 text column, 1 number column, and 1 date column. All the way at the end, which is a bit more clear now, you can see the row count, and this is 1036. So this is great. It's now a lot easier to look through, even more specifically that maybe we're only really interested in, let's say, the mean. This column has a mean, this doesn't, and this really doesn't. So it's only really this one we're interested in, but we didn't know that from before. What you can then do is to go to the previous command, and here you can pass in the optional argument, I think mean. Let's try this. Yeah, so that works. Count date doesn't have a mean, ship date doesn't have a mean, and here the total cost. And now you can see here, if it comes like this, you can probably skip the CSVkut thing, because then it doesn't really take that much space anyway. So let's just actually cut out the CSVkut, no pun intended, and then just do it directly on the file. And here you can see all the columns. And this only makes sense for number columns. There you can see the means of quantity, for instance, here, and total cost, acquisition cost, and so on. See now as a final example, you're starting from the top. So let's remove data.csv. So we just have our base Excel file. One thing that's quite common is to first turn it into a CSV file, then pass it into csvcut to cut out some columns. Let me just scroll a bit up so I can see here. Let's pick, for instance, quantity and total cost. Yeah, that's those two columns. Let's pass this again into csvstat, but I only want the mean. That gives me this. And finally, I can maybe save this to a file called mean information. For instance, just save it as a text file. Just to see that everything went fine, I can use the cat command for mean information. And here you can see that this has been stored. I think with examples like these, you can start to see how useful really CSVkit is. Imagine having to do this manually. You have the Excel file, you have to open it, you have to aggregate some columns in Excel, you have to save this as a text file, all of this manually. First of all, this is a lot shorter just to type out if you're getting comfortable with it. But secondly, imagine that you have to do this multiple times. Maybe you get a new CSV file every week. Then every week you might get slightly better at Excel, but it has a certain minimum point. You need definitely to use at least 1 minute to do this every week. But once you have the command written once, you can just execute it several times. You can even save this in a bash script, for instance, and run it automatically on the file so that no manual labor is required. So CSVkit is a great automation tool, and now we have 4 commands into CSV: csvcut, csvlook, which we didn't use in this lecture, and csvstat. This is of course also important to note. I didn't use csvlook in this video. In a pipeline, you don't need to use all of the commands, of course. You typically won't use all of them. That would be very strange, but then you have a broader range of tools that you can use to handle essentially any type of CSV task that you can imagine. I hope this was useful to you. In the next video, we'll look at a command called csvgrep, which is a command for searching through CSV file really efficiently. Thanks and have a nice day.